thanks all of you for coming on. Yeah, to another one of our great candidate forums. I think it's really valuable, the service that we're doing. I consider it a real service, a real community service. On behalf of the board of the West LA Democratic Club, I want to welcome you. I think most of you know me. I'm looking around. I think I know everyone on the chat right now. I'm Cara Robin anyway. And yeah, and like I did last week, I really would like us to just take a moment and be thankful for what we have here and think about what's really important, and perhaps to take maybe 10 seconds to close our eyes and send positive thoughts, positive energy to those people suffering so badly in Ukraine and actually all over the world where these ego-driven conflicts are occurring. So I just want to take a minute to do that, please. Okay, thanks. Thank you. I think they've got to feel it, right? I mean, I don't know, but at least our energy is on the way. So if there are any candidates joining us today, I don't always see the whole room, but please put your name and the race that you are vying for in the chat, and we'll acknowledge you. And wow, we have an exciting day today, two really big contests, you know, for the mayor and CD11, which impacts many of you on here today. I know a great majority of our board, of our club, in fact, is in the CD11. So the format that we will be doing is each candidate will have a 2-minute opening, 2-minute closing, and between 1.5 and 2 minutes to answer questions. I think our moderator, Dayen, will maybe indicate that and guide it. The ballots for both races will be going out at 1 o'clock today, and we'll have a half hour to vote. Balloting will close at 1:30, and we should have the results immediately after. Yeah, so we're really very fortunate to have Dave, our club member, Dave Dayen, as our moderator today. I think you could have all probably seen and linked to his bio in all these emails I keep sending out, but now he is the senior editor of the American Prospect. He's just returned from Washington, where I'm sure maybe he'll give us a little insight to what's going on. And Dave, take it away.
Well, thank you, Cara, and I guess I'll vamp for a little bit while we await the other candidates. I know Representative Bass is here, but I'm not sure anybody else is at the moment. So we need to wait a couple of minutes for everybody to show up before we begin the proceedings. Yeah, I'm David Dayen. I'm the executive editor of the American Prospect, prospect.org. We are a magazine about ideas, politics, and power. We do a magazine 6 times a year and then daily coverage at our website, and I invite you to check it out. We do a lot of coverage on sort of the economic forces that are shaping our world. We just did a very successful supply chain issue about every node of the supply chain and how policies going back the last 50 years are responsible for shortages, increases in price that we see right now and what we can do about it. Our next, which is coming out very shortly, we're just wrapping it up. I was in Washington closing that issue last week. We're gonna have a series of interesting profiles, including one on Rohit Chopra, the new director of the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau, Jennifer Abruzzo, who is not a name well known to people, but she is the general counsel of the National Labor Relations Board and is actually transforming American labor from that perch. She also we are interviewing and profiling a Senate candidate in Missouri named Lucas Kuntz, who is running an interesting populist campaign there, as well as a mayor who was recently elected by the name of Justin Bibb in Cleveland, Ohio, experiencing many of the similar issues and topics that we see here in the city of Los Angeles. So we're excited about that issue coming up, and all of those pieces will be out on the web probably in the next 2 weeks. Whole bevy of stuff at prospect.org. Yeah, we have newsletters daily. We have a new podcast relationship, the podcast called Left Anchor, that is done by our new managing editor, Ryan Cooper. Just, you know, if you want your stuff in email, if you want it in audio, if you want it on the web, if you want it on dead trees in print, we got everything for you. So that's my little 2 cents about the prospect. Obviously, I don't know if I'm still vamping or not, but
Still vamping. Tell us
okay.
current events, baby.
Well, I mean, obviously, Kara kicked it off by talking about the war in Ukraine, and we have focused quite a bit on not just the geopolitical implications, but the economic implications, the idea that this finally could be the end of globalization as we know it. The changes in energy security and kind of the false hope that we had that this was a nation of energy independence have been sort of laid asunder by the fact that, and the recognition that in a global oil market, what you produce in your own country is somewhat irrelevant to the price of oil more generally. And we're painfully seeing that right now. I think the state of California is doing a very interesting experiment in Democrats agreeing to rebate $400 a year to the public. I think a rebate idea is a shock absorber against inflation, as I wrote last week, is a very interesting concept. There's a bill in Congress that kind of emphasizes the financing for it, but it really is a rebate for inflation. You might know it as an oil windfall profits tax, but all of the money and the revenues that are pulled from that are supposed to go toward rebating using those revenues to rebate low-income people who are struggling with high gas prices. And I think the rebate is what's important here, that what we saw during the pandemic was in a time when people were struggling financially. Giving them money was a solid way to ameliorate that. And this is a difference in philosophy with some people who think that the economy is somehow overheating and that giving poor people too much money was the reason for high inflation, ignoring a whole bevy of other situations like the pandemic and the massive supply chain issues that were caused by shrinking and centralizing production in a few countries overseas and putting so much pressure on global shipping and other parts of the supply chain that it ended up creaking and breaking. So anyway, I think that we're going to see some interesting parts of that. I'm looking in the chat and was asked a question about Supreme Court justice hearings. We are going to be covering them, obviously. I don't expect a terrible amount of fireworks there. Republicans, while they began talking about how the fact that Biden had promised that the next Supreme Court justice would be a Black woman was a terrible injustice, they must have seen a poll, because that very quickly ended. Like within a day, they stopped talking about that very rapidly. Maybe they were informed that President Reagan promised a woman the slot that eventually was held by Sandra Day O'Connor. But anyway, we are going to cover that. We've been covering the nomination fight between Ketanji Brown Jackson and Michelle Childs, who is a Supreme Court potential candidate who didn't get the job. We ran a lot of articles about that, and I assume, you know, to the extent that something happens that's newsworthy, we will get that done. Anyway, Where are we at, Cara? Can we?
Well, that's what
get
I'm
started?
looking. I am looking. I'm
We have 76 people in the chat, which is excellent to hear
yeah,
me
but how
rambling.
about how about I saw that I thought Kevin DeLeon came on. Karen Bass is on.
Mhm.
Does anyone see any of the other candidates because they're supposed to be here? Right. Well,
Well, while you check on that, let me
2
just talk
minutes.
about for a couple minutes about the importance of this next mayor's race. You know, when I heard I was doing this earlier this morning, I put a poll, or sort of just a call for questions out on the on Twitter, and found that the main issues that my followers were saying were important to them really mirror the main issues that I had already written about in the course of my questions. I think that this moment in not just Los Angeles, but across the country is a real hinge point. There is between state and local fiscal recovery funds and funding from the bipartisan infrastructure law, a lot of opportunity with respect to mayoralties and municipal governments across the country. And there's also with both COVID and inflation and a host of other challenges that we're going to get into, a ton of uncertainty. And the next mayor is going to have to navigate both of those things with a lot of precision. And it'll be good to get an exchange of their views today so that we can make an informed choice. So, Cara, you let me know, where are we at?
I just texted Mike Feuer
Okay.
saying, hey, where are you? So, I mean, I assume he will be on in a minute. I'm going to just call one of his staff right now.
And now, you told me earlier that a surrogate for Joe Buscaino was going to.
Mike Feuer has arrived. So,
okay.
No.
So we have 3, but there is no surrogate, or yes?
There will be no surrogate for Joe Buscaino.
Okay, so we have 3 candidates then here today, and they're all here, so we can get started, which is great.
Yes, we can.
So I will just briefly mention who the 3 candidates are, who we have with us, and then I will call on each of them to make their opening statement for 2 minutes. As Cara mentioned, we will do a number of questions where we will get, why don't we just put up the clock to 2 minutes on those questions now, especially because we only have 3. Then we will also do a closing statement for 2 minutes at the end. We have,
if I may, quick question.
Yes.
Who's doing the timekeeping, and what's that going to sound like for the candidates?
Thank you, Kelly. Ingrid will be doing the timekeeping as she did the other day. She did a wonderful job. Ingrid, you want to see what your 1 minute and 30 seconds sound like?
I believe she will ping you, candidates at 1 minute and 30 seconds. She will call it out loud.
Dulcet tones. She's very dulcet.
She will call it out loud in her demure way. So we have Congresswoman Karen Bass, we have LA City Council member Kevin DeLeon, and we have Los Angeles City Attorney Mike Feuer. We might as well start in that order. So I'm going to call right now on Congresswoman Bass for 2 minutes to give us an opening statement, and welcome.
Well, first of all, thank you for having me here this afternoon. And I want to greet all of my friends in the Democratic Club and our work together on Sea Change to win those seats in Southern California. So I am running for mayor because Los Angeles is facing a public health and a public safety crisis. I believe it is an emergency. And I remember when we had the earthquake many years ago, we pulled out all stops. We were able to rebuild the freeway, get people housed. We did whatever it took in order to put the city back together. And I believe that's the same spirit we need to do today. We need to have today in order to prevent another 1,500 people from dying on our streets, with 40,000 people unhoused. this is something that absolutely cannot continue. So we need to declare a state of emergency. We need to address this in the same manner, which means locally a state of emergency, but we also need to involve the state and federal government. You know that I spent many years dealing with crises on a number of different levels. One, I worked for a number of years at LA County's emergency room. I took care of patients that were unhoused. I took care of patients who were suffering from mental illness and substance abuse. In 1990, when we had a crisis with tremendous crime and crack cocaine, gang violence, I went to the heart of South Central and started an organization to address that. And then I went on to the state assembly, and in the last 2 years served as speaker and had to face another crisis, the state's worst economic crisis since the Great Depression. I was able to bring Democrats and Republicans together and keep the state from defaulting. When I went on to Congress, I chaired the Congressional Black Caucus, and during the pandemic brought together the Black Caucus, Hispanic, Asian Pacific Islander, and Native American caucus, and we fought for and won billions of dollars to address the disproportionate way COVID was impacting our community. Many of those dollars went to protect people from falling into homelessness and also to address homelessness, and provided the funding for Project Home Key, Project Room Key, et cetera. Coming back to Los Angeles now and addressing this crisis, I think it is the time we need to bring our city together. I have spent many years building coalitions and collaborations across race, class, geography, ideology, and I believe that that's what the city needs now. A decisive leader, but a leader who is ready to have the city come together and Angelenos turn toward each other and not against each other. Because I believe we have all of the knowledge, the skills, and the resources in this city to address this crisis, but we need to come together to do that. And I would love to ask for your support today. Thank you very much.
Great. Thank you, Congresswoman Bass. I'm going to move on to Councilmember DeLeon for an opening statement for 2 minutes.
Thank you so much, David, and good morning to each and every one of you WestLADem Club members. On June 7th, in just a few months, you'll be asked to vote for the next mayor of Los Angeles. And the question is very simple and clear. What kind of city do we want? Do we want an LA that works only for the super wealthy and the elite, or a city that works for people like us, working people, middle-class people, where we can live in safe neighborhoods and afford to support our families and raise our children? Do you want more of the same empty promises, or a doer, someone who understands the challenges you are facing and will act with a sense of urgency to solve our biggest problems? Now, I was born right here in downtown Los Angeles to an immigrant, a single immigrant mother with a third grade education, a woman who works for 3 years in the home.
Excuse me.
This is an interview with Jon Stewart.
Somebody's, excuse me. I'm so sorry, Kevin. Somebody's background call. Everybody stay muted, please. We need
interrupting some local warm-ups.
Who is this?
I always have to make sure that my range.
Who is doing this? Oh my gosh, I'm so sorry.
Somebody has a television on, it sounds like.
And we've got to mute everyone.
That's right.
Well, it looks like
They when I
everybody
got on
is.
it, I ignored them. They went out to
I gotta bring it all. I
Oh
can't.
my God.
We're related. We're cousins here.
That's exactly.
Your cousin's here. Great.
This is In Conversation from
I am so sorry. Kelly, can you mute everyone?
If you're just joining us for the first time, welcome to the show.
This is really mortifying.
Hey,
All right, maybe
now that ended it right there.
This today is Jon Stewart.
No,
He's out with a new show on Apple TV Plus called
who
The
in the
Problem with
world
Jon
is
Stewart.
doing this?
Now, this isn't just another satirical
well, it's very
news
simple,
show like The Daily
Cara.
Show.
You
There
have
are
the
already a
power
lot
to
of
mute
those out
everyone.
there.
So why
I
don't
know,
you-
but
This
Kelly
is a
is,
place
I
where-
can't.
Do I just move forward? You give a thumbs up? Okay, I got the thumbs up. Okay. Because I don't know where we left off. Should I just start over again? Yeah, thumbs up. Okay, good, thumbs up. Okay. Well, thank you so much. I'll just say, on June 7th, in just a few months, you'll all be asked to vote for the next mayor of Los Angeles. And the question is very simple and straightforward. What kind of city do we want to live in? Do we want an LA that only works for the super wealthy and the elites, or a city that works for people like us, middle-class people, working-class people? A city where we can live in safe neighborhoods and afford to support our families and raise our children, our grandchildren. Do we want more of the same empty promises, or a doer, someone who understands the challenges you're facing and will act with a sense of urgency to solve our biggest problems? Now, I was born right here in downtown Los Angeles, to a single immigrant mother with a third-grade education, a woman who worked her fingers to the bone, taking care of the very wealthy for the vast majority of her life. And at a very young age, she taught me the value of hard work, that good things don't come easy for those who are often overlooked and underestimated. And like so many Angelenos, I know what it feels like to live on the margins, from renting a room in an already crowded house to renting a room with my family underneath the house, a basement. And there are too many of us who know what it feels like to work 2, sometimes 3 jobs, just to put food on the table and the clothes on the back of our children. So we know what it's like to wonder if we can pay the rent or the mortgage, or just keep living in a city that we love so dearly. Now, I've lived that life, and I walked not just one day, but most of my days in your shoes. And it's why we're doers. We work hard. We keep our nose to the grindstone. We keep our head down. We fight like hell for everything that we have. For me, it's never been about being a good vote or a good Democratic vote. It's about using my power to solve the major problems, taking on challenges no Democratic politician would even touch, to get things done for working families. The future we want is within reach. And together, and I'll say West LA Democratic Club members, you were with me back in 2018 when we took on the whole Democratic establishment, when no member of Congress wanted to even come near me. I only had 3 members of Congress, Ro Khanna and Jimmy Gomez, and Lou down in Correa, down in Orange County. They were the only ones who had the courage of their convictions to stand up. You stood with me, and we came that close to become the next US Senator. I know the future that we want, a livable future for working class families, for our homeless community members, for our children and grandchildren who want to have a better life in the city, is within reach, but only with the right leadership. I thank each and every one of you for the amazing opportunity that you're giving us here today, and I look forward to your questions. Thank you, Dems.
Thank you, Kevin. I apologize for that disruption.
No problem.
And now we're going to move to Mike Feuer, who is LA City Attorney, and you are up for 2 minutes for an opening statement. Welcome.
Thanks very much. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, great. So, because I'm listening for my Jon Stewart moment, and I'm still hoping it happens at some point. So, listen, Kara and Club, it is such a delight to be with you again. I am the only candidate who is going to all of LA's neighborhoods, all 101 of them, on the west side, from Mar Vista and Venice to Brentwood and Westwood. Yesterday, I was in Pacoima and Sylmar and Sun Valley, listening to what voters are asking about the most, because that's who I want to govern, by listening to communities' priorities and then acting on them, as I've done throughout my career. And everywhere I go, I hear some very similar themes. Folks want a mayor who has the executive experience, the proven ability to lead, who can step in on day one and shake up the status quo and get things done. I am the only candidate with that executive experience here in Los Angeles, accomplished, successful experience to be able to take that decisive action. And we need it now on so many of the issues that we know we care about together, from homelessness and affordable housing to grappling with the economic inequities caused by the pandemic, to making sure our communities are safe and we reform at the same time. So I've been effective in each stage of my career in not just stepping in and seeing things as they were, but envisioning what things could be. As the leader of Betsedic Legal Services, standing up for the most vulnerable people in our community and creating what a newspaper said was a national success story. On the city council, shaking up that status quo there with a front page LA Times story saying fewer causes furor on city council floor, because I was moving forward on ethics reform and gun violence prevention and creating 311. In the state legislature, in the teeth of the pandemic, writing an author of the Homeowners' Bill of Rights and making sure that kids with pre-existing conditions had insurers who had to cover them, writing some of the cities and state's most important gun violence laws. I've been a legislator and I'm now an executive. The legislator has to have a vote An executive has to have the ability to set a vision and then hold managers accountable for effectuating that vision and getting things done. As city attorney, the American Bar Association gave my office its top award in the nation for a public law firm. Never happened before or since for a city attorney. LA Times said I set the standard for future city attorneys to follow. I come from a family that has instilled in me the importance of stepping in when things are the toughest. A dad who was a prisoner of war to the Nazis in World War II, who told me you have to do the most important work in the world. A mom who grew up in Boyle Heights speaking Spanish, Russian, Yiddish, and a little English, who taught us when the Japanese American friends she had were taken away that she learned and instilled in us, you got to stand up for people when no one else will stand up for them. I'm taking that vision and those ideals and running for mayor to be a guy who delivers concrete, decisive action, shaking up the status quo, standing up for people when no one else will stand up for them, and making sure that we move forward on homelessness, affordable housing, safety, the economy, and environmental justice, just as I've done throughout my career. I hope I can earn your support again. Thanks very much.
Thank you. This should be a great spirited discussion. So let's start with the question that, in talking to people and getting questions from club members and getting questions from outside my little informal Twitter poll, this was clearly the #1 question. So and I'm going to start with, by the way, all of the candidates will be answering the same question. So I will rotate who begins, who gets the first crack at the question. But for this one, I'm going to start with Congresswoman Bass. So the Joint Center for Housing Studies at Harvard University has found a direct correlation between the percentage of a city's population that is unhoused and the median rent in that city. In other words, homelessness and affordable housing are inextricably linked. To that point, state housing regulators last month ordered Los Angeles to accommodate another 255,000 homes in their plan by mid-October, or risk billions of dollars in affordable housing grants. I want to know what you're going to do to preserve those needed funds and to improve the situation of affordable housing in Los Angeles. So let's start with you, Congresswoman Bass.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Well, absolutely. I know the city has to return that plan by October, or they will definitely lose an awful lot of money. We have to do everything we can. I think we need all hands on deck. We need to build affordable housing. And what that means is that we need to expedite the building. So one of the reasons why it costs so much and one of the reasons why it's so slow is because of all of the bureaucracy on the city level, the bureaucracy on the state level. And one of the things that I would like to do would be to rally the business community so that we could have a fund so that while builders are going through the process that takes so long to qualify for financing, we could have bridge loans. That's one of the things that needs to be done. We also need to fast track. So having in my administration, I would have one person who would be responsible to me, who would deal with the issue of housing, the unhoused as well as the affordable housing that we need to expand on. And so a person who is building affordable housing should be fast tracked through. They shouldn't have to go through all of the hurdles. That's one of the reasons why it costs so much. If there were bridge loans, that would be able to decrease it that way. I think that this is the greatest issue that's facing our city. We know that over the next few years, it's not 250 units of housing, it's 500,000 units of housing. And that's why it's so expensive to live here. LA has become unaffordable. Many of our adult children can't even afford to live in the city anymore. And the only thing that is going to bring down the cost of housing is to increase the supply. So expediting it, centralizing people who want to do affordable housing so that they are not standing in the same line with someone who wants to expand their porch or put in a new kitchen. Things should be fast tracked because this is one of the most important issues in our city. But we also have to make sure that those people who are teetering on the brink of losing their housing can actually stay in their housing. We need a comprehensive approach, and that means we need to have cooperation on the city, state, federal, and county level as well. Thank you.
Great. I'll go to Councilmember DeLeon next, and then City Attorney Feuer.
Thank you very much for that very important question, David. I know what housing insecurity feels like. Like I just mentioned a few moments ago, I myself also too experienced homelessness in my early 20s when I was in college. I slept on friends' couches, I slept in my car, and I slept on the office floor where I worked at for 2 years. If you just deal with exclusively with developers and the market, that's not going to correct the inequities that currently exist today. You need to be a leader. And as a leader, you need to move policies with a sense of intentionality and purpose. That's why I'm moving forward with making sure we have inclusionary affordability. Because if you don't mandate it, then the market forces will not create the affordability, housing, stock, inventory that we sorely, desperately need. That's why we have so many people living on our streets. In fact, we have 70,000 vacancies right now in the city of Los Angeles. So there are vacancies, there are inventory, there are stock. It's not a supply issue per se, but they're not 70,000 units. They're affordable for very low income, and middle income families. The median price of a home today is $1 million. The average rental is $2,600. So the per capita household income in Los Angeles is $62,000 a year for a family of 2.8. So the next leader has to move with a sense of intentionality and purpose and dictate the negotiations, not letting the market or developers dictate that. Because if you do, then we'll be in the same mess that we're already in. 41,000 people living on our streets today leaves us with a profound indelible mark of shame. And the very fact also too, that you have so many working families, the people who actually make the city go, without an eviction moratorium, which they failed to do at the federal level, without that eviction moratorium, you'd have a huge tsunami of more unhoused individuals living on our streets or sidewalks, in their cars, in their on our parks. You know, we shouldn't be doing that in Los Angeles. That's why the affordability issue will be really key, keeping a roof over the house of so many family members. And also too, let me say, when it comes to rent control, that's critical because you can't lose that stock either. You have to protect that stock and add on top to that stock so we can have a city that's inclusive, so we can have a city that's truly reflective of who we are, not just the super wealthy and the super elite of Los Angeles, but Angelinos who actually make this city go. So one, you have to have mandated affordability, because if you don't mandate it, it doesn't happen. Two, you have to protect the affordability stock that we currently have. We cannot lose that. Three, of course, you have to streamline the process. That's a go. That's a given right there. But that was time, David?
Yeah, I believe it was, right?
Thank you very much. Gotcha.
I'm sorry, Ingrid, just let me know that button meant that was time, right?
Oh, the button. Which one is it?
The ding.
Oh, I didn't hear it. That's fine. I'm sorry. Okay, got you. Thank you.
Okay, that was time. Okay, Mike, we'll go to you.
Terrific. So I want to urge David, you and all the members of the club, this question's a good example. Listen to which candidate has a command of the issues so that we can hit the ground running on that first day. I'll be very specific. First, I'm going to say there are about 10 general managers who touch affordable and homeless housing. I'm going to say to them, if you want to keep your jobs, you're going to decrease the time it takes to site and approve that housing. And I'm going to mean it. There's a transit-oriented communities program in our city that focuses on creating affordable housing along transit corridors, building up, creating mixed use. And I'm going to be expanding the TOC program because it values two things: getting people out of their cars and expanding affordable housing. Next, a number of employers in the pandemic have seen their business models change to telecommuting, creating vacancies in commercial buildings. I'm going to expand our adaptive reuse program to integrate affordable housing into otherwise commercial buildings. Next, the LAUSD has seen a diminution in its enrollment of about 300,000 students. I want to co-locate affordable housing on underutilized school campuses. Teachers can't afford to live anywhere near where they work, and we have homeless kids who who don't have no roof over their heads going to school. We can change that. I want to change rules that are outdated in the city. In San Francisco and New York, there are models, for example, where individuals rent an apartment with a bathroom off a bedroom and a bathroom off of a common area where they cook and have recreation together. You can't do it in LA. Need to change those rules and update them and change that. I want to focus on what are called accessory dwelling units, granny flats in people's backyards. Currently, they can be rented. I want to use the law to allow owners to sell those units, creating first-time home ownership opportunities to people who could never afford a 2,000-foot house, but they can afford a 500-foot unit like the size of my kids' apartments, and then build equity and enter and escalate their role in the housing market. I want to preserve the affordable housing units we have. HAFLA the Housing Authority has a program, for example, where it's starting to acquire affordable units. And unlike under rent stabilization, when someone vacates that unit, it goes to the market rate. They will retain the rent controlled level when that person leaves. There are housing bonds that have not been used by the city to create middle-class housing in Los Angeles. Anaheim, Long Beach, other places have used these bonds. We should be using them too. I have a comprehensive vision of what it takes that's very concrete to advance the ball here, because you are right. There is that dramatic correlation. Someone shouldn't be spending more than 30% of their rent on their housing. In Los Angeles, you spend dramatically more than that. And what does that cause? It causes people who work here to either crowd into overcrowded units or to live elsewhere, congest our roads, pollute our air as they drive in and then drive back to where they were, leaving their kids, creating other social problems. These are deeply intertwined issues. I wrote the law that authorized Measure R to go to the ballot here, creating $35 billion for public transit, because land use and transit policy are so deeply tethered together. As mayor, I get that. And all these facets of affordable housing, you're going to see major changes right away from me, because I have a very specific agenda for what it takes to create more affordability in a city that lacks it right now. We cannot have a city of just rich people and poor people and no middle class either. Thanks very much.
Great. Thank you. Thank you very much. Really, really good answers there from everybody. So I'm going to start with Kevin on this next one. The two pandemic years, 2020 and 2021, people aren't going to believe this, but they saw the lowest levels of citywide crime since 2015. However, violent crimes like homicides have spiked significantly. And concurrent with that, the LAPD's clearance rate for solving homicides in the past year was 55%, which was dramatically lower than the FBI average rate, and also dramatically lower than it was before the pandemic. Jill Leovi's book, Ghetto Side, explains how historically the clearance rate in Black and Latino communities in Los Angeles is unacceptably low. Setting aside the very charged debate about funding in the LAPD, how would you improve the actual solving of crimes at the LAPD? And how should LAPD be held accountable for not solving crimes?
It's a very good question, David. Let me say that I grew up in a neighborhood that had its fair share of violence. So I know what living in fear feels like. And I know that the most important job of any mayor of any city, especially a large metropolitan city like Los Angeles, is to protect our citizens, our residents, our Angelinos. Let me say this, is that anyone can make big, bold pronouncements on the issue of law and order and public safety and ask for thousands or more police officers on the streets. But before we talk about that, we need to get our own house in order. The statistics that you just pointed out, David, with regards to unsolved homicide crimes and how disproportionately they're impacting families of color, immigrant families, Latino families, Asian American families, African American families in our zip codes throughout the city of Los Angeles is not unique to the city of LA, because it's been with us for years, if not for decades, and it mirrors many other cities throughout Los Angeles, I should say throughout the country. The police chief, without question, plays the most vital role. But who is mayor, makes a difference, and the leadership that they exercise with priorities in terms of resources that are utilized to solve these crimes. Now, of course, the FBI in Washington, D.C. Have a lot more resources in comparison to the LAPD, but nonetheless, that's not an excuse. We should be able to focus the resources that give peace to family members who have lost loved ones. We need to utilize that and hold the chief of police as well as the police commissioners and the commanders and the deputy chiefs, accountable for making sure they focus, and they can move heaven and earth to solve these homicides that have impacted so many Angelenos, but in particular, communities of color in certain zip codes that are disproportionately impacted throughout the city of LA. It's an issue of priorities. It's an issue of making sure we utilize our current resources, but reprioritizing those resources as well to the specific task of the Homicide Bureau Department to make sure that the caseloads that we currently have and the cases that are unresolved, which are 50%, we start increasing that. So again, we can give peace to our family members throughout the city of LA.
Great. Mike, let's go to you.
Terrific. So, as you know, the majority of that violent crime increase is attributed to gun violence. There's been a 53% increase in the last 2 years tied to gun violence issues. I'm very proud of my leadership on the issue of gun violence since the 1990s. The Obama administration invited me to speak at the White House to governors and mayors and lawmakers across the country about how a local leader could be deeply effective in the absence of federal congressional action. So when it comes to this issue of increasing violence, weeks ago, I proposed as city attorney a series of 8 steps designed to grapple with gun violence increasing. And the first of those steps is at the heart of your question, David. I proposed that we create a gun violence homicide review commission modeled on activity from Milwaukee and other places around the country where I've worked as city attorney in my leadership of prosecutors against gun violence. What that commission would do is bring together not just LAPD and the DA, but my office as city attorney, the FBI, the alcohol and tobacco and firearms folks, U.S. attorney, at the table looking at specific gun homicide cases to identify trends and patterns and community actions that are creating the environment where that gun violence happened, and then taking lessons learned from that review and moving forward. I've done the same thing regarding the places in which gun violence is escalating. I propose that the county and the city work together because there are certain regions of the city where gun violence is most concentrated. I reach out to the president of the board of supervisors or the chair and her top deputy to talk about how we can collaborate around those lines. Now, to your specific question, as mayor, the mayor needs to hold the police department accountable in the following way. You look at the statistical average across the country for cases closed, you compare it to LAPD, and you say within a year, I want to see metrics month by month that show case closure rates are increasing to the pace that is reflected across the United States, period. And the police commission, who is appointed by the mayor, holds that police chief accountable for achieving those results. If those results aren't achieved, that's a major measure of whether the police chief retains his or her job. It's as simple as that. But the depth of this is to focus on gun violence in particular, to focus on the multiple agencies that touch aspects of gun violence, to bring them together to review those factors, and then to use that information to enable LAPD to be most effective. Last thing I'll say regarding the increase in violence, by the way, is ghost guns are at the heart of much of that increase in gun violence. And as city attorney, I brought a groundbreaking lawsuit that has been talked about across the United States against the major distributor and manufacturer of ghost guns, which are the increasing crime gun of choice on the streets here of Los Angeles. Our lawsuit tests a novel approach. Let's stop the flow of those weapons in the first place onto our streets.
Thank you, Mike.
Thanks very much.
There it is.
That was very gentle. Thank you.
that is typically gentle.
Yes.
Okay, Karen.
Yes. Well, first of all, the increase in homicide and the lack of closure of those cases is concentrated in South LA. And I believe at the core of the problem is the lack of relationships between the police department and the community. There is not trust there. In Los Angeles, we have 2 different styles of policing. On the west side, it's a guardian style of policing. In South LA, it's a warrior style. Because there is not the relationship with the police department, there's very little cooperation. And frankly, there's very little attention from the police department to solving the homicides. There is a solution to this. It just is not invested in. We absolutely need to control guns and knives and other forms of violence, but the homicide in South LA is predominantly with guns. So what I want to do is invest in proven, evidence-based, proven prevention models. Some of them we pioneered at Community Coalition, where we
30 seconds.
We worked with people who had been gang involved. We formed the communities, we formed projects with community intervention workers. We can get those projects funded, and that is the way you can bring down the homicide rate. So one, we want to clear out the investigations now, but we also want to think about how we prevent homicides in the future. And so funding community-based projects, the Community Safety Partnership, the GRID program have not been invested in. The community workers have not been invested in.
Thank you so much.
Thanks, Ingrid. And Ingrid, just to be clear, we're going to give them 2 minutes on these questions.
I didn't have.
Okay.
Yeah, I don't know that was 2. Let me give Karen 30 more seconds on that.
Okay.
Thank you. So the programs that we can fund, we did this one summer in South LA where we wanted to see if we could prevent homicides in a summer. We knew the hours in which shootings took place. We knew the days of the week. So in one area, we recruited young people who were at risk for being gang involved. We recruited former gang members. We put them through training programs so that they would understand how they could intervene and negotiate and mediate. And by the way, I was just able to get funding from the federal government. We are able to fund special projects now, and I funded several peacemaking projects in South LA to deal with this problem. We have to address the homicides when they occur, but we need to prevent them in the future as well.
Okay, great.
Thank you.
Okay, we're going to move on. This question, Mike, we'll start with you. In 2021, 294 Angelenos were killed in traffic collisions. This was the highest rate in 20 years. Half of those killed were pedestrians or bikers. Traffic deaths have gone up 58% since Mayor Garcetti instituted the Vision Zero traffic safety program. In reaction to this, the mayor just reduced traffic speeds on 177 miles of roads a couple of weeks ago. What would you do to reverse this epidemic of traffic deaths that we have seen over the past year?
Thank you, David. So a number of things. First of all, I support the slowing of speeds on streets. There's also a slow streets program that I would expand in neighborhoods, not just on major thoroughfares, that has arisen during the pandemic and been remarkable in increasing pedestrian use of those streets. I believe strongly in expanding the number of protected bike paths. As city attorney, when the city first began rolling out an expansion of bike paths, we were seeing a number of incidents that were causing liability for the city because they just striped the path, didn't pay attention to the quality of the paving on that side of the path. I'm going to change that as mayor. I want to also talk about using data to address this issue, because those homicides, what happens on the streets and those deaths attributed to vehicular problems are not all across the board spread out around the whole city. They are concentrated in certain locations of the city. And I want to use that data to identify intersections in particular that tend to be the most dangerous and make physical changes at those intersections. And I also want to use the information about those most dangerous intersections to apprise the community about locations where vehicular deaths are most predominant, because parents, for example, can suggest to their teen kids that they ought not go to those locations. There's also an issue of street racing that is prevalent in certain parts of South Los Angeles and the Valley and the east side of the city in particular. I want to increase the task forces at LAPD. They're associated with gathering information about those likely street racing incidents and intervening before they occur. I'm also very supportive of changing physical infrastructure on the street, including more left turn signals. More left turn signals on our streets contend with the issue of impatience by drivers cutting through at the last minute through those intersections. Those left turn signals can save lives as well as improve our quality of life and improve traffic flow. So these are all steps that I would take, but I would begin by instituting an assessment.
Thank you.
Oh, sorry. Thanks very much.
Thank you, Mike.
Thanks a lot. We'll move on to Congresswoman Baz.
One, I would fully fund Vision Zero. And as Mike pointed out, those traffic deaths are concentrated in certain areas. South LA is one of the areas where there's a disproportionate number of deaths. I think it raises the question to me, both of these questions, of equity in our city. And as long as we approach the city and frankly the county by dividing everything up equally in 15, I think that it doesn't allow us to focus resources in areas where we have problems that are specific to those areas. I definitely think we need to do more with our bike lanes. Just having a white strip in the pavement is not enough. We need to have soft barriers like they do in a number of cities, cones that can be distributed so that bikers are safe, but it also applies to people who are on scooters and some of the other new models of transportation that are out there, but fully fund Vision Zero and have
1 minute.
in the areas where the deaths and the accidents are concentrated. Thank you.
Okay, thanks. And Councilmember DeLeon.
Thank you so very much, David. And West LA Dems. It's a very important question because you have two issues here that's happening. One is you have an issue of LA is still the #1 most polluted city in America, according to the American Lung Association, or ozone, in particular matter 2.5. You have over 2,000 Angelenos who die prematurely because of tailpipe emissions. Also, too, we have hundreds of deaths unnecessarily due to crashes. And this is something that we have to change because the hardscape of the city of Los Angeles, because the way it was planned, and politicians from the past, they didn't create a city that was sustainable. They didn't create a city where we could walk. They didn't create a city where we could bike, where we could do so without the fear of being hit, by a vehicle. Being challenged by 5,000 pieces of metal, is always scary when you're riding your bike in the city of LA. And that's why the next mayor has to transform the city and make it
1 minute.
with his
Keep going.
with their vision to create a city where we can walk, where we can bike in safety, where we can have not soft barriers, because the soft barrier is not going to prevent a 5,000-pound vehicle from crashing into you, but rather hard barriers. But you have to do so again with a sense of intentionality. For example, downtown Los Angeles, we're going to make Grand Avenue one of the great avenues in the world, where we're going to shut it down, where people will be walking, you'll have kiosks. You have to create that type of environment throughout the city of LA if we're going to reduce the number of unnecessary deaths that are happening, especially in neighborhoods, whether it be in Wall Heights in East LA, whether it be in Pacoima, whether it be also in South LA, and also this happens in West LA. We know it happens in West LA with great frequency. How many folks do we know who have been hit by a vehicle? But you have to do so with the Department of Transportation that has not just the vision, but also the wherewithal.
Thank you, Kevin.
The landscape of Los Angeles.
Okay. Thanks very much. All right, next question, and we'll start with Karen Bass. I'm curious as to your philosophy on economic development. Do you believe it benefits the community to offer subsidies and tax abatements to companies so they'll stay in the city or relocate jobs in the city? Or do you believe that a highly educated workforce, good infrastructure, cultural amenities can actually attract businesses? What are your commitments on economic developments, and will we see the kinds of large-scale subsidies that we've seen given to large companies like Tesla, like Amazon throughout the country?
Well, first of all, I think it depends. I mean, I've certainly seen subsidies being completely abused, being given out in extreme amounts with very little return for residents. But I do think that subsidies, tax subsidies, I do think that they can benefit sometimes. But, I think that the message that has been sent to businesses in LA is one of two. One, that the city is not friendly, doesn't care much about business, or two, that the city is hostile to business. I do think that income inequality is the profound issue that we're dealing with in the city. And of course, the most extreme manifestation is homelessness. And the only way to deal with income inequality is for people to have better paying jobs. And there's only 3 jobs you can have. You can either work for yourself, you can work for the public sector or the private sector. And I would want to send a message to businesses that we are open, we want you to participate. And I would have a deputy mayor for business that would convene
1 minute.
Businesses such as entertainment, education, and healthcare. But I would also want to focus on small business developments and really address equity. So especially businesses that were hit by the pandemic, businesses that are women and minority owned, and make sure that we can actually support their development. I think that helps economic development overall. And I do think that it would be great to convene the financial institutions so that the financial institutions, we could put together a pool of resources that would help small businesses grow. And we need to do that all over the city, because you can look at some of our areas, especially in the inner city, and you see a lot of places that have no businesses at all, buildings that are boarded up, are small businesses that are barely hanging in there. So my belief is that you can use subsidies in a way that's very positive. We certainly used tax credits for the film industry when we were basically losing that industry.
Thank you.
We were able to bring in thousands of jobs because of that.
Okay, great.
Thank you.
Kevin?
Thank you very much, David. Listen, small businesses are the backbone of the economy of the city of Los Angeles. Let's be very clear. And those small businesses were eviscerated during the coronavirus global pandemic. Now, when we talk about subsidies, this comes out of your tax dollars and it comes out of our general fund. I think tax credits, quite frankly, are almost like catnip to Republicans who go into a frenzy anytime that you can offer any type of tax credit, incentive to big corporations. Oftentimes, they simply don't work. I was the lead negotiator for the Hollywood Film and TV tax credit. I was a negotiator with Jerry Brown. And I was in a room when we created the largest tax credit program for runaway production in the history of the state of California, $1.3 billion. However, I didn't do what Hollywood wanted to do, which was an old, tired paradigm of a lottery system. What I did is I wanted to create economic output, and that all the Hollywood studios, whether it be Paramount,
1 minute.
whether it be Universal, Comcast, Sony, whether it be Fox, or whether it be Disney, that they actually had to prove economic output, jobs that have been created in Los Angeles, not just these billionaires from Malibu that have a $300 million productions, but you don't know if they're actually creating real jobs in the city of Los Angeles. That's why we have to be very careful, because when we talk about tax credits, it comes out of the general fund. So you're competing with parks and open space, and you're creating with libraries and with other really, really important issues, public safety, fire, and police. So we have to be very careful, but we have to help our small businesses because they are truly the backbone of our economy, and they themselves have been eviscerated. They're not overly capitalized like major corporations right now that can withstand all of these major hits with the global pandemic. These folks are the backbone, and we need to, as a city, lift them up, because if they do well, they'll do well as a city, and they create the most jobs.
Great. Thank you.
Thank you.
Mike, we'll go to you.
Thanks very much, David. So again, I want to be very specific. Steve, you asked about essentially place-based tax incentives. And let's talk precisely about what happens in LA. The lion's share of those incentives have been devoted to trying to incentivize downtown hotels to locate there. At this point in the evolution of downtown, I do not support those kinds of incentives, which reduce the hotel's obligation to provide transit occupancy tax to the city. I would rather have those resources devoted elsewhere. Where precisely? To phasing out the business tax that affects small business development. I'm going to have a deputy mayor in charge of small business. I'm going to lead the effort to phase out the gross receipts tax that is choking small businesses. I was just a few days ago in Lincoln Heights talking to a business owner in particular was saying that would be the most important thing the city could do to help get him back on his feet after the pandemic. I think we should have a jobs and economic cabinet that looks comprised of private sector leaders and government.
1 minute.
That looks to identify the next economic sector of which LA is going to grow. We have health sciences, green economy, entertainment, and so on. I want to continue to be on the cutting edge in those regards. Dave, your question was, are there a bunch of things happening in the city that are most important to major businesses? And the answer is yes. Tax incentives are not the most important to them. I was talking to a major company who has just fled Los Angeles to go to Austin, Texas, and put its headquarters there. He said the major issues for me are affordable housing, homelessness, transportation, and education, because I got to be able to attract employees who want to be here. So on the one hand, I want to use our scarce resources to live up our small businesses. when it comes to attracting major businesses here, that package of ingredients that make a city sustainable and livable for employees is the most important facet of what it means to a CEO to identifying where to focus his or her operations in the United States. We have weather. We should be building on more than just our good weather to make that those choices happen here. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks very much. Okay, we're going to start with Kevin on this next question. So during the pandemic, LA Metro engaged in a mass zero fare transit experiment. For 22 months, 281 million fares were not charged. This ended in January, but Metro instituted a free transit pilot program for students last November for K-12 and community college. Other cities across the country, like Boston and Kansas City, have moved to a more permanent zero fare transit system. Fare revenues are 4% of the overall Metro budget. Do you support a zero fare system, and in what ways would you recover the foregone revenue for the Metro budget? This is for Kevin.
Without a doubt, David, would support 100% fare free, not just for our young folks under the age of 25, but also for our senior citizens, our young folks, millennials and Generation Z. Many of them don't want to purchase a vehicle. So we have to create the public transportation infrastructure that will be ubiquitous throughout the city and throughout the county, throughout the region, which is really critical if we're going to reduce our greenhouse gas CO2 emissions, as well as our carbon dioxide equivalent, NOx, SOx, ozone, particulate matter 2.5. So we can have cleaner air for the city as a whole. And at the same time, we're already incentivizing a behavior that's actually way ahead of the curve before us because of the incentives. Make sure that it continues to be free for all of our young folks, as well as our Angelenos. With regards to recovery, which is really critical, as Mike Feuer was the author of Measure R up in Sacramento, I was the author of Measure M.
1 minute.
Which was the extension of Measure R in perpetuity. The challenge that Measure R had was it had a sunset. And what we did with Measure M is we increased it in perpetuity. So we'll have streams of revenue in perpetuity on the sales tax to fund our public transportation infrastructure throughout the state, so I should say throughout the region, throughout the county. That's why the next mayor, along with 3 votes for a total of 4 votes, coalescing with other members of the Metro Board, can have a majority that drives the vision for the entire region of Los Angeles and how we reduce our carbon footprint. Of course, we have to work very closely with our friends in Sacramento, as well as Washington, D.C., when we talk about the offsetting specifically of that revenue that otherwise would not be coming into the coffers of Metro, because now we are subsidizing. But with that subsidy, we create more ridership.
Thank you.
With that, thank you very much.
All right, thanks. Mike, zero fare transit.
Yes, support it, but we have to do a couple other things. If you notice, not even when fares were zero, ridership was declining. It was declining because of the pandemic, with people uptight about being in inside spaces, other people. But even as the pandemic began to subside, there's been lower ridership because people are concerned about safety and cleanliness and the quality of service, especially on our fixed rail systems. We need to change that. We need to have more presence of both law enforcement and unarmed officials on our public transit to be sure that riders feel safe. My own daughter, who rides the Expo line, often decides where to sit based on where the security guard working the night shift is located. She's lived in some very tough neighborhoods. She shouldn't have to worry about her safety on the Expo line, but there are concerns about that. And cleanliness too is an issue. We'll be accentuating that because we need to get not just the people who are transit dependent back into public transit, but new riders onto public transit. You asked, David, what do we do about the shortfall in revenue created by that potential 4% diminution?
1 minute.
But there are 2 different ways I can think of to do that. First of all, the federal government has been good about pouring funds into capital projects and lousy about pouring funds into operational projects. As mayor, I'm going to lead a coalition of mayors who have major transit systems in going to Washington and saying we need to be changing that paradigm. I've done the same thing on gun violence, creating prosecutors against gun violence across the United States. I want to create that coalition of mayors, getting the federal government to change its funding paradigm. I also want MTA to be thinking about new ways of generating revenue, including potentially leasing land it owns that are adjacent to our public transit thoroughfares to private investors, in exchange for which there'll be revenue infused into Metro, but those private investors should build affordable housing adjacent to those public transit thoroughfares as a part of the deal. So there are multiple ways for us to be creative about recouping that revenue, but to get people back on public transit requires more than simply reducing the fare to zero. It requires making the experience of riding public transit safe and clean.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Karen?
I definitely agree with fareless transportation. I think that that is something that would really increase ridership. But as was mentioned also, I think one of the key issues now is cleanliness and safety. And I would have a safety corps that would go beyond law enforcement. Law enforcement is important to have on the lines, but we also need mental health specialists. And we need homeless outreach advocates, because you know that many people who are unhoused are using public transportation as a way of not having to sleep outside. And it goes to, again, addressing how so many of these problems are interconnected. You talk about income inequality, you talk about homelessness, it impacts our quality of life in every way, shape, or form. And so as we want people to get out of their cars and to use public transportation, we have to make sure that they will feel comfortable doing that. So to the extent that we can address the problems of the unhoused, to the extent that we can address the reasons why people are unhoused, such as mental illness and substance abuse, and we talk about ways to do that, we need to have federal regulations relaxed. We need to have HUD relax some of their requirements around the vouchers. We need to have Health and Human Services relax some of their regulations around mental illness. We have facilities that can be used to help people who are mentally ill, but unfortunately, the federal government says you can't house more than 19 people in a facility. I had a press conference about a month ago in a hospital with 344 beds that is going completely unused right now, is used for film production. Why? Because the federal government's restrictions say it can't be used. And so I am advocating in the months remaining that I am in Congress advocating for the federal government to relax that so that facility can be used. People with mental illness, people who are experiencing homelessness, occupy public transportation 24 hours a day to stay off the streets.
Thank you.
Safer. Thank you.
Great.
Thank you.
All right, this next question, I think I probably have 3 more questions left. So this next one is, we're going to start with Mike Feuer. The city of Los Angeles spent $236 million on overtime for LA firefighters in 2020. And that's indicative of COVID effects, but really also a staffing deficiency. A high-profile case of a chief deputy who was apparently drunk while overseeing the operations center during the Palisades fire led to a $1.4 million payout. The LAFD is reportedly under review from the Justice Department in Washington over civil rights violations. The head of the Fire Commission, a 5-member civilian panel that oversees the LAFD, said that the best thing that could happen to the fire department is to blow it up and start over again, and that politicians have simply not held it accountable. My question to you is, how would you rehabilitate this critical agency and work on these deficiencies?
A really important issue, and let's break it down into pieces. One thing you didn't mention is that the fire department has unfortunately had a long history of discrimination based on race. It has had a history of discrimination based on gender, and sexual orientation issues are important in the fire department to grapple with as well. And as mayor, I will have zero tolerance for that tradition, and we're going to shake things up and change it. We have a new fire chief, Chief Crowley, with whom I've worked successfully for a number of years to grapple with nuisances and combined properties and warehouses that could become fire dangerous and so on. I think she's the right person at the right time to lead the department. Let's talk about the measures of success that I will demand as mayor. First of all, zero tolerance for that discrimination within the department. Second, it's going to require a change in the leadership among the top managers in the fire department to further diversify that leadership and assure that all voices are being heard. It's going to require a mayor that demands accountability when it comes to the future recruitment of firefighters in the city to assure a diverse and well-trained force. But there's something else you didn't mention as much, and that is we have firefighters who live outside of California and often make huge amounts of money through that overtime. Yes, the amount of overtime spent is indicative of an understaffing issue in the department, but I also hate the fact that we have firefighters who are living elsewhere in the country. Now, a state measure years ago precludes the city from having a residency requirement, but we could have a requirement that says you got to be living close enough to Los Angeles to be here on the scene in the event of an emergency, and those emergencies are becoming more prevalent right now. So a top-down review based on the metrics we're discussing in the fire department is absolutely imperative. I'm the only the only person who's running for this job who's actually overseeing the budget for the city as the chair of the council's budget committee. I'm going to assure the priority is that they're staffed properly and not expending needless resources on overtime. But I want to change these other practices as well because they've been poisonous in the department.
Thank you, Mike.
Move to Congresswoman Das.
I also think the fire department has tremendous problems with discrimination on race as well as gender. I have met with the Women's Firefighters Association as well as the African American Firefighters Association and have heard many stories of difficulties. And it's also, it's definitely race, it's gender, it's the fact that a number of the firefighters, as Mike mentioned, live out of state, but it's also a lot of political differences too, in terms of people who play out their own perspectives, some of whom were suspected of participating in January 6th. I'm not sure if that was accurate, but the politics of January 6th apparently permeates in many factions within the fire department, which is a real problem because that creates an air of hostility. I am proud of the women firefighters, though. I met with the African American and the Latino Firefighters Association, and I think they do have very specific plans.
1 minute.
They have recruitment efforts that need to be focused on. We need to expand the number of firefighters, but we also need to support those affinity groups to make sure that they are heard, to make sure that they are listened to, because they do not believe they are, and to make sure that their recommendations, and they do have very specific recommendations to address the discrimination. However, those recommendations have never seriously been considered. So I think that we can get a roadmap for how to deal with this from the firefighters themselves. And I think the next mayor needs to pay serious attention to this and implement the recommendations from the firefighters themselves. Thank you.
Great,
Thank you,
Kevin.
Kevin.
And Kevin DeLeon.
This is a deeply institutional issue and a deeply institutional challenge that the next mayor must wrap his arms around very quickly and lead the way. The reason why I say this is that we've had 3 African-American fire chiefs already. We already had a Latino fire chief in Ralph Terrazas. So this didn't happen overnight. This has been going on for decades, even when you have fire chiefs of color at the helm. So this is deeply rooted in culture and it's deeply institutional. I was proud to actually speak up for and vote for our first female fire chief, our first lesbian fire chief in the history of the city of Los Angeles. I will continue to support her and make sure that we diversify our rank and file membership. And remember, it took a major lawsuit, to open up and diversify our rank and file membership.
1 minute.
Fire department. And the fact that, both Karen and Mike have made it clear to you, and I share the same sentiments. When you have firefighters who are living in right to work states and red states, and obviously they have every right to adhere or to follow any political party if they want to, but there's a bit of irony too when you have a defined benefit pension plan, and the very politicians in Washington, D.C. and elsewhere want to take away those defined benefit pension plans, yet they're attracted culturally. When you have a first responder showing up to your house and you don't know that individual has been, has had the vaccination or has been boosted, and they're showing up to your front step, So there's something that's deeply cultural within the institution that's going to require the right leadership to make sure that it puts it on the right path. And also we have to diversify and create pipelines within the city of LA. And I challenge any legal memo that's been offered by the city of LA that says we could not actually have pipelines of students of color from South LA and
Thank
East
you,
LA.
Kevin.
Thank you very much, Ingrid.
Thanks a lot.
Thank you, Kevin.
Okay. we'll go with another question. We'll start with Karen Bass. Back in 2019, the LA City Council approved a motion for a public bank for Los Angeles under a state law that allows it, AB 857. Public Bank LA is currently working on a white paper addressing capitalization and business lines. With infrastructure needs climbing and also very available thanks to federal matching grants and also the coming Olympics, a public bank would reduce reliance on municipal bonds and potentially save a lot of money in borrowing costs. Do you support a public bank for LA as an alternative to private borrowing markets?
I would support a public bank. I would support it as an alternative, but I do think that we need all the resources that we could get. So yes, it would be something that I would support.
Okay. Short and sweet, like it. Let's move on to Kevin. DeLeon.
Unequivocally, 100%. Let me be very clear here. This is something that I have supported openly and publicly when it was a measure that went through the city council before my time. But I stood there when Council President Herb Wesson, when it went to the ballot, although it came up short, I did support it. When I was the leader of your California State Senate up in Sacramento, there was a proposal, the idea of our own state bank, our own public state bank, I support it 100%. I know Nebraska has their bank there. Why should we be at the helm, the lack of the federal regulation at the federal level with all the private banks that we know that have ripped off so many consumers? Why should we be at the helm of JP Morgan and Goldman Sachs and other, financial institutions when we can create, with the right capitalization, our own public institution bank? So when it's about investments in climate change, for example, and we want to electrify our transportation system, the price points are dramatically a lot less than what we'd be paying in the private sector. Remember, each time we go to the market, you have to pay your principal as well as your interest. So when we talk about $1 billion, $1.2 billion, say HHH, for example, on homeless housing, and you have $800,000 per unit, you have to pay the principal as well as the interest on top of that. That's usually about a $2 million at the end of the day when you end up paying that bill with all the investment institutions that hold the note. That's why we do need a public bank for the city of LA, and we must lead the way for the state as well as the country.
Great.
Thank you, Kevin.
Mike Feuer.
Thanks. Again, these are just terrific questions. I will say that if a public bank can be planned and executed properly, I would support it. But I also want to look carefully at what those ingredients are. Public banks, for example, you have to be sure that the bank is sufficiently capitalized to work. You have to insulate it from political whim by the city council. It cannot be the case that the public bank is dependent on 8 votes when it comes to its investment strategies. I strongly support the idea, since community banks are going to be too small to take up the slack that big banks have failed to take up. I strongly support the idea of a public bank that could, for example, expand micro lending to small businesses and take other steps to shore up the city's infrastructure. Those are good things. But I also want to, I want to be sure that it's planned well enough so that it's not set up to fail. I remember when the public bank idea was put on the ballot, the Times called it the most ill-conceived, half-baked proposal that they'd ever seen from the city. And that doesn't mean that it couldn't be well planned. It meant that that particular proposal wasn't well planned. So as mayor, I'm going to insist on a strategy that can be effective when it's implemented along the lines that I just described. And I would explore doing that. Recall that after I went after Wells Fargo in the fake account scandal, the city divested itself of a relationship with Wells Fargo. That was a good idea. We need to be assuring that our public investments are in institutions that act ethically and that invest in our communities locally. That's the key theme of a public bank from my standpoint. Let's be sure that it can actually work, though, to achieve its objectives.
Thank you, Mike.
Thank you. I think I have time for half of one more question. So I'm going to ask a small version of this question, and we'll give 1 minute for the response. Who am I starting with? I'm starting with Kevin on this one. Would you see any circumstance under which Los Angeles, under your tenure, due to the planning that needs to be conducted, would pull out of hosting the 2028 Olympics if, for example, the long-term costs don't align with the short-term benefits? And I'll give you 1 minute to respond on the general topic of the 2028 Olympics, which will be a huge planning part of your mayor out.
There has to be an absolute firewall to make sure that taxpayers are not going to be footing that bill. Be very clear about that. But one advantage that we have with Los Angeles in comparison with Tokyo, Paris, London, as well as Beijing, is we already have the infrastructure that's been laid out. We have the USC Coliseum, we have LAFC Bank of California Stadium, as well as SoFi. We have a basketball arena in Staples or Crypto.com. We have UCLA, USC. We have a new stadium being built, or I should say, a new basketball arena. But let me say
30
this.
seconds.
If we can move heaven and earth to build football stadiums as well as basketball arenas, we can as sure as hell move heaven and earth to build the homeless housing that we need for unhoused neighbors in the city of Los Angeles. Let me be very clear about that right there. So could there be a scenario where we do pull out altogether? If we go upside down, there's no question, because I'm not going to hold the city of Los Angeles, keep them in the red because of Olympic glory, because I don't want to win the gold, the silver, and the bronze for most homeless in the city of Los Angeles, the entire world.
Very good.
Thank you, Kevin.
Mike.
Thanks. I don't anticipate pulling out of the Olympics. Would I have chosen in the first instance to make that a priority, given everything else that's happening in the city? No, I would not have. But given that the Olympics have been committed to here, there are a number of important safeguards in place that are designed to eliminate that possibility, David, of having those cost overruns. Kevin mentioned that the infrastructure is here as opposed to Tokyo, for example. There's an insurance policy that is designed to hold us harmless from pandemics and lost ticket revenue and that sort of thing. So I think the likelihood of a cost overrun of the magnitude you're describing is small. The planning for it, however, is crucial for the next mayor. And what I'm going to do as mayor is to hold the Olympic Committee to benchmarks that we can assess progress along the way with hard metrics for achievement, so that we don't find ourselves late in the game saying we missed deadlines that we should have adhered to and now we're out of luck. So that's a key theme for me generally, is that my experience as an executive shows me that the best way to be effective in planning something big is to create benchmarks and timeframes and hold folks accountable along the way. I'll do that as mayor on the Olympics.
Okay, great.
Thank you.
And then Karen Bass.
No, I would not envision at all us pulling out. In fact, I think that the Olympics can be used as a catalyst to help us resolve some of the issues that we have. And, way before the Olympics, we have other international events coming up. As a matter of fact, in the next couple of months, we have the Summit of the Americas coming up. Leaders from all around this continent will be here. I think we need to use these events to create a spirit in this city that we have to improve things. We have to address the 40,000 people who are on the streets. We have
30
to
seconds.
the graffiti that is everywhere. We have to have our city be the pristine city that it can be. And we use these events as a catalyst to get issues resolved. I don't want to see it used as a reason for just pushing the homeless people aside, getting them out of our way so that they're not seen. We should use this as a catalyst to resolve our problems. So I cannot see a scenario where we would pull out. That would not be necessary.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, so we're now going to move to closing statements. Since Mike Feuer was last in the opening statements, I'm going to start with him. In the closing statements, we will then go to Kevin DeLeon and then finally to Karen Bass. So Mike, take it away.
Yeah, thanks very much. This has been a marvelous discussion. Really appreciate it. Terrific questions and a great club. As we conclude here, I want to end where I began. The next mayor needs to have the proven executive public sector leadership experience, accomplished, successful, right here in Los Angeles, to make the status quo get shaken up and get things done on that first day. Everybody is impatient. Everywhere I go in town, people want impatient leadership in the office of mayor. And they want a mayor who has a command of the issues based on long experience, so that on that first day, the mayor is able to direct managers to achieve specific goals and hold them accountable in a publicly transparent way. We are a city in crisis. A city in crisis needs to be run with a sense of intense urgency. And I brought that to every role I've had. A city in crisis needs to be run by a mayor who has not only grappled with crises in the past, but in every job I've held, I've gone well beyond what was expected to change the status quo, to envision what could be, and then implement that. Not do things the way they were done before for the sake of perpetuating a status quo, but looking beyond and what could be, and bringing people together with a sense that we have common ground and common purpose in this city. A mayor needs to inspire with that level of leadership, that unifying leadership, and then a mayor needs to roll up their sleeves and be sure that that vision is effectuated to keep faith with voters. I've run successfully for 3 different offices. Each time I put a piece of paper on the board that reflects all the promises I've made as a candidate. And each time, every single commitment I have made as a candidate has come true when I've been in office, because I think to keep faith with voters, we have to show them that we mean what we said. That's the level of leadership that I'll bring to being mayor. The LA Times said I set the standard for future city attorneys to follow. Well, I'm going to set the standard for future mayors to follow. Thanks very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Moving on to Kevin DeLeon.
Thank you very much. WestLADem Club members, I'm not going to tell you the truth, because the future we want for our city is within reach. We need a leader who's tired of having the same endless debates, who isn't interested in playing politics with people's lives. Someone who will lean in and do something instead of just talking about it. Now, I've done that before as leader of your California State Senate, because together we took on the big fights and accomplished things most presidents would only dream about, let alone members of Congress or members of council members or city attorneys. We took on Trump to protect our immigrant families with Sanctuary State. We took on the political establishment to increase the minimum wage to $15 an hour. We took on polluters to make sure our children can breathe clean air, Senate Bill 100. We took on the National Rifle Association to take dangerous guns off our streets. And right now, you may be angry about the way things are going in Los Angeles, because you should be angry, because you deserve so much more from this city. It isn't right that only some neighborhoods are safe and that only some neighborhoods have parks, have open space, have clean air to breathe into the lungs, and clean sidewalks. And it isn't right that only the wealthiest can afford to put food on the table and keep a roof over their head. You deserve a fighter in City Hall. You will demand who will demand the very best for every neighborhood, every Angelino. If you give me the great honor of being your next mayor, I know we can take on and overcome the biggest challenges that are before us. You were with me when we took on the establishment in Dayen Feinstein. Other Democratic politicians stood with the establishment, or they stood on the sidelines. They didn't show to demonstrate the courage of their convictions, but you took a chance on me, and together we almost won. This is within reach, a new type of leadership. You know my body of work. It's demonstrable. You can compare it with any politician running for office today or anyone in the past. It's within reach. 100% clean renewable energy. Cal Savers, the greatest retirement security plan since the creation of Social Security, giving our senior citizens a modicum of dignity, respect, and retire with dignity and respect. I thank each and every one of you for the consideration and for the honor. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. And then we'll wrap up with Karen Bass. Thank you.
Well, thank you so much for the opportunity to be here with you today and the work that we've done together over the years. Los Angeles, as I began, is in a crisis. I have spent so many years in my life addressing the very issues that Los Angeles is facing now. Whether I spent 14 years at Community Coalition in South LA, addressing crime, addressing substance abuse, and addressing affordability back then, or going on to Sacramento and addressing the state's worst economic crisis since the Great Depression, or being in DC, where I have managed to build coalitions across party lines, even with the partisanship of DC, and bring back resources here to address the various problems. I have been building coalitions across race, class, geography, ideology for years, and I believe that that is the type of leadership that Los Angeles needs now. We need a leader who is decisive, a leader who is and a leader who is willing to make the risk. We have fought together on so many different battles. I will have an office that is led with integrity. I will make sure that we do not have the corruption that the city has faced over the last few years. I will bring in Norm Eisen, who was President Obama's ethics czar. Obama administration was the most scandal-free administration in our lifetime, and that is what we need here. We need to bring back integrity to public office so that people trust the people who are in charge. But I really believe that people who are in charge, elected officials, have to have the ability to reach out to communities and to bring communities together. The problems that Los Angeles face will only be addressed if we all stand together and build the type of citywide coalition that says the problems that we are facing affects all of us and will only be resolved by all of us. So thank you for the opportunity.
Thank you.
With you today, and I respectfully ask for your support.
All right, great. Thank
you.
you to all three of you. This is, I think, going to be a tough choice for the city of Los Angeles, and we really appreciate your time today. So thank you very much. Cara, are we going to move headlong into the CD11, or are we going to give a couple minutes break here?
Yeah, good point. Well, we could all take a stretch, seventh inning stretch. I want to thank you all. I mean, this was really wonderful and great questions, David, Dayen, really, and wonderful answers. All of you are so prepared. I'm just like, we can't lose. Whoever one of the three of you are who gets elected, the city is very lucky. I know it's a hard choice for all of us. But I want to thank you all from the bottom of my heart for coming on and sharing your time with us. I know how busy you all are. So bye, y'all.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome, Mike.
Great to see you all. Bye.
Great to see you all.
Thanks.
Yeah, so if you'd like to all take a little break for a minute or two, I don't know.
I'm going to take at least 1 minute. So
okay.
I'll be right back.
Yeah, we can open I don't know, a little chat here if you want. Anybody want to say anything? Oh my gosh, I think this was great though. I will tell you, I think this was
great
really,
candidates. Great
really
candidates. Yeah.
And I think we have a really good bench here for the forum that's coming up. Oh, here's, let's see, Tracy Park just came in. I know Mike Newhouse is here. I'm not sure if
Allison's here.
Allison's here. Greg just came in.
Yeah.
I know, it's just terrific because, everybody is jammed. Everybody's got their forums, they've got fundraisers, they have families, they're very busy, and they are taking time out of their schedules, seeking our endorsement, but more than that, presenting their positions, sharing their information, what they are. Wait, somebody's speaker is on, so we get background noise. Anyway, we're really grateful that they are taking time to join us. And I hope that, they took time on their questionnaires also. And they were put in our e-letters that I keep sending out like every day. And so I hope you all took time to click on their questionnaires and read some of the other things that they have to say, because that does give you an indication of what's important to them and what they would like you to know. So maybe at that, is everyone here?
We've got a couple of hands raised.
Hands raised. Dayen, did you want to say something, Dayen?
Yeah, I do. I wanted to say I really was well informed about this. I mean, the only candidate I really had looked at was Karen Bass. And while I'm still for her, I think we have two guys who are just fantastic. I wish we could have 3 mayors of Los Angeles.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. But you are within 100 feet of the polls here, so we can't do, any electioneering.
Sorry.
That's okay. I get it. I get it. We all have our faves. So do we have everyone here?
I see Rick Tuttle's hand.
Oh, Rick. Okay. What do you want to say something, Rick?
Oh, just I just want everyone's here, so I'll be very brief and just say Mr. Dayen, terrific job with the questions, and Cara, you and the club to get these candidates here with their busy schedules is a tribute to just a remarkably good group and a tribute to the club and its potency. And it's been built over the years, and you've been such a part of it, as have so many other people here. Just great. So anyway, I'll yield my time back, Madam Chair.
Oh, thank you, Rick, and thank you for being a supporter and always coming to our meetings. And okay, so I'm going to turn it back over to Monsieur Le Dayen and and see if all the candidates are here, and we'll spotlight them all.
Okay, great. I know we have 6 candidates, and my memory is going to have to be refreshed as to who they are, so I can make sure that they're all here.
We only have 5. I think.
Oh, we only have 5 today?
Did not fill in the questionnaire or respond to